This is Sean Harris, and I'm a co-host with Paco Garcia with the GMS Magazine podcast. And
Hello, everybody.
today we're going to be discussing world building, um,
Yes.
things we want to see, things we're tired of seeing, ideas for new things that we want to see. So I don't know, Paco. We were just talking about this, and you mentioned how like you like new things.
I
So
I do. And actually, I'm coming to think about it. Now, it comes to my head that we are recording this on December 30th of 2020, which is probably one of the most horrific years for an awful lot of people, for very good reasons. It's a year with very few good news all round. And I'm thinking, how poetic that we're talking about world building and starting new things and doing things differently when we're facing a 2021 where all the effects of the horrendous shit that we've gone through in 2020 are going to force and make us change our world, how we're going to do a little bit of, we're going to be forced to do a little bit of world building in our own lives. And, quite interesting that completely unplanned or unprepared, here we are talking about world building, eh, you know, at the threshold of a year that's going to make us rebuild a huge chunk of our world.
yeah,
Um, so I think I would like to say to everybody who've gone through some hardship in this year, and this is not going to be released until after New Year has gone. But I would like to say, for anybody who's gone through some shit in 2020, which has been probably most people, hold on, hold on to your hats, because this is not going to last forever. And as the old adage of the LGBT campaign from 10 years ago, it gets better. It will get better.
yeah. Fingers crossed. I'm here to see it.
Well, I need to believe it will. I don't think many people can cope with another 2020, and I don't think many people deserve that. To
Mm,
be honest, another 2020 is it's been bad enough.
mm.
So enough. Let's see if we can get to 2021 where we can just be a little bit kinder to each other, whoever we are. Let's just count to 10 before we reply, and let's just be kind to each other. Let's have a go at that. See what happens. I think we'd be surprised. But
Right.
anyway, we're going to talk about role-playing games, as you say. And to answer your question, which I'm sorry I have avoided for so long, yes, I am very keen on changing things, especially when it's about world building. Um, and I don't get why people would not want to do that. I just don't get it. I love changing worlds and building new fantasies. I think it makes sense.
Right. Yeah.
No,
Um,
we're talking about world building, not about world replication.
right.
So yes, I do like changing things. Now, how much do you think we need to change the world building that we have seen for so long in fantasy?
A lot, I think. Um, I think for me, the draw of fantasy, especially world building, is to like is the whimsy of it. you know, I think that's one thing I really miss about fantasy. Fantasy with a sense of whimsy. Like I was just on Tumblr the other day, and so there was this post about this place called Dinotopia, where humans and dinosaurs have share a world together, and the dinosaurs have been domesticated. So they use them for like uh racing mounts or like draft animals and things like that. So and I thought, wow, that is so neat because I don't see anything that bonkers, anymore. Or and and I'm even thinking about like um things like and if I want to go further back, it's like I don't see things like Alice in Wonderland anymore or even just your general fairy tales. It's just also rigid and logical and practical. And I'm like, where's the really bonkers off the wall stuff? The parts where where people mash together things that don't exactly go together, but you know leads to some really interesting scenarios. And and I'm not even touching on the representation angle. I'm just saying, like, where's the imagination? Like, the really, like, I don't know. Well, I do know, but it's just, I don't know. I guess I want to see more, a little more courage, a little more chutzpah, some more outrageous imagination, you know?
It's interesting because firstly, I'm going to admit that because of lack of time, I read very few novels.
Mhm,
I don't think in 2020 I've read more than two novels,
mhm,
and one of them was Les Miserables, and that took me a long time.
mhm,
I mean, that was a book about the size of a ginormous yellow pages of you know
mhm,
listeners, you should know what yellow pages is by now. If not, otherwise please do look for it. It's interesting. It's a piece of history, trust me.
mhm,
um uh so the only fantasy that I read, I consume, is either in movies, series, or role-playing games, which I do read a lot. I read like maybe 20 of those a year.
mhm,
Now, in role-playing games, yes, I have seen some very, very interesting concepts uh, appearing not not too long ago,
mhm,
and I appreciate those a lot. Probably the weirdest fantasy role playing game that I've read this year has been Black Void,
mhm,
and that was really good,
mhm,
very, very good. It really captured the spirit of Planescape
mhm,
with a little bit of Dark Sun thrown into it,
mhm,
and a touch of science fiction.
mhm,
So it was, I really liked it. But you're absolutely right that we don't see many like that.
mhm.
Nibiru is another one that I've read that really hits a nerve on that. It is a completely bizarre
Mhm.
world, but it's more
Right,
science fiction than fantasy. So yeah, I don't
right.
think that fits. But you're right. We there are few, but there aren't people. People are not trying to break the mold anymore.
Mhm,
They just try to cast it, if that makes
mhm.
sense.
Right, yeah. And, and another example that came to mind when you talk about films and TV shows is like, Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Like, why
Hmm.
is that a role play game where you play cartoons and humans sharing a world together? Um, that's another one of those bizarre concepts where it's just like, well, you can hardly like wrap your head around it. Or something like Fable. I don't know if you recall this comic book series about like all the fairy tale characters who live in this uh, district and a city together, and so you have like Snow White and the Big Bad Wolf and like Cinderella and all of them in like one area. But
I can't remember. No.
yeah, it's really neat, really neat. I have to revisit that to be honest. But yeah, it's just I don't know. Maybe is it? Do you think that is because I want to know. I wonder why we haven't gotten a really awesome, bizarre, whimsical, imaginative stuff that role playing games should be capable of. I don't know why we don't get that.
I'm going to go off a limb here and say something that's probably going to upset an awful lot of people.
Mm,
And I don't want people to. I would like people to take this with a pinch of salt. Okay, I'm not trying to be offensive here or anything, but I get the feeling that that is for two main reasons: movies and video games.
mhm,
I don't think there has been a movie in the last 20, perhaps 25 years that has really gone out there in fantasy. We haven't had a labyrinth or dark crystal
Mhm.
or even never ending story.
Mhm.
We haven't had one of those for a huge length of time.
Mhm.
And fantasy video games, and true, I haven't played them for a number of years now, for about 4 or 5 years that I gave up on video games. But the ones I have played, they just play on the regular standard medieval Europe fantasy trope with a veneer of something else on top of it,
Mhm.
which might be very good, like Dragon Age. It might be very, very good, but it doesn't stop being a Tolkien-esque
Mhm.
setting with a veneer of something different that makes it good.
Right.
And I reckon that's we have been so inundated
Mhm.
with this, and commercially companies have gone for it because they knew it sells, because it's a
Mhm.
very safe formula, that we haven't seen, the labyrinth, the dark sun, the planescapes
Mhm.
of yesteryear. We haven't seen people with a completely out of this world idea thinking, I'm just going to do this, and a company saying, wow, this is different, let's go for it. We just don't
Mhm.
see that.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I'm like, okay, and I know market forces have a lot to do with it. I guess it's easier to sell something like well, his Dark Materials is what's on HBO right now, or a Game of Thrones or something like that, than it is to sell something that's really, I don't want to say challenging, but conceptually challenging, where it's sort of like the weirdness doesn't go away. It's just the
But
weirdness, kind of the baseline of.
yeah, but I think the word challenging is very good actually, because those new kind of works, they are a challenge at every level. They're a challenge to get to understand them, they're a challenge to get to like them, they're a challenge to get to market them, they're a challenge to get to sell them, they're a challenge to just get to grips with it.
Mhm.
And I get the feeling that as a Western society, we are really shying away from accepting and overcoming challenges,
Mhm.
that in the media that we consume.
Mhm.
It's very rare that something that truly challenges us succeeds at the level that we think it should succeed. Sensate is the first thing that springs to mind.
Mhm.
That was a masterwork
Mhm.
at so many levels, and yet it didn't get the traction I feel it deserved.
Right.
And that's
Yeah.
been the weirdest series I've seen for a while, I think.
Yeah. I had my serious issues with Sense8 and with the Wachowski siblings in general, but like the way you feel about Sense8 is how I felt about the Get Down. Um, the the conceit where it had kind of merged the birth of hip hop with this sort of kung fu movie element.
Hmm.
was really is like, not, of course, yeah, visually and artistically it's like really amazing, but it's also just like this, you know it, it, it's not exactly it's not a documentary, so, but it's a fictional representation of the birth of hip hop that borrows a lot from kung fu movies.
Right.
I can't, who does that. So it's like, okay. And what else was I thinking? Well, they had the when it's like and when you mentioned things like Labyrinth and the Never Ending Story and the Dark Crystal, it's like, yeah, those things are becoming quote unquote popular again, but only in a nostalgic sense. Um, we're not seeing new things like that being created. The and that's, I'm not even touching the book for the Never Ending Story, which I have to replace because mine got lost. Um, but yeah, it's just I really, really, really want to see like that more creative aspect. And speaking of which, like more creativity and more variety and more novelty. And it's probably going to sound really bad coming from like, you know, me as an American. It's just, but it's also like, I want to see some more, of course, some more cultural diversity. Like, I really liked Black Panther, and for mostly for the world building. It's like it didn't really need a plot for me. It could have just been World of Wakanda, like a whole travelogue of a film, and I'd have been happy. So, and I'm wondering, like, okay, so where are the things like that? You know, but really uh, interesting. There's like Afrofuturism. There's
Mhm.
and that's just Black Panther. Like there's a whole movement of Afrofuturistic stuff. Because I mean that stuff's old, like as old as Parliament Funkadelic. They've been they've been on the mothership for a minute. Um, and then there's Janelle Monáe, who's like also drawing a lot from Afrofuturism and like her stuff like with Dirty Computer and all that. Um, and what else culturally wise? It's like Firefly gets a lot of press and a lot of praise, but I'm like, yeah, there's a future in which people speak Chinese, use Chinese characters in their writing system, but there are no Chinese people.
Yeah. I could go on that show for ages and ages.
Yeah,
Sorry, I absolutely adore Fillion, but oof, that show has some issues.
yeah. So I'm like, okay, well, that would be interesting, but I was like, I wonder what like actual Chinese sci-fi would be. um, or actual Taiwanese sci-fi, or actual, Cantonese sci-fi. Um, there was someone on Twitter who asked this thing about Indonesian culture, like not, I don't know if it was post-colonial or pre-colonial, like pre-colonial fantasy or post-colonial sci-fi or something like that. And I was like, this question is unfair because I want both. Like, I'm just because we don't see like Indonesian culture is not exactly uh one of the places people draw inspiration from when they want to take a break from the usual Western European stuff, or the usual American default stuff. And, and I think Indonesian culture really is like fascinating because those raid movies really turn me on to it,
Mhm.
and I want to see more genres being explored in Indonesian culture besides action movies. Um, but yeah, it's just I mean, we have whole games. We have games about being dead. We have games about being monsters. We have games about all kind of stuff. But but it's still like, how do I say this gently? It's still about the straight white male as default.
Yes.
So, and I know you're not a fan of the new Wonder Woman movie. I am. Wonder Woman is my emotional support superhero film series. So we're, we're not going to get into that part. I'm going to we're going to have to argue about this in another episode. But the thing that I was really impressed by was Themyscira as a concept, like a whole island where there's all women, or a whole island where there's no men. But I'm not sure how non-binary people fit in that paradigm. Um, so is it all women or just no men? Which is a completely different. These are completely different questions.
Agreed.
Um, so what happens when you take patriarchy out of the equation, or when you take and then in the films it's very obvious that there's no racial stratification there either. So what happens when you take out patriarchy? When you take out white supremacy? When you take out uh, heteronormativity? Because uh, kind of hard to have that without the man bits. Um, without men, and it's like, well, that would completely, it would like kind of, that would change a lot. Like just your basic working assumptions about how the world works. It's just would change a lot. So
The-
yeah,
The thing is, I get where you're going with this. The thing is, and again, I'm going to say something that may upset some people, but this is a fact. To do that is beyond the capabilities of most people. To imagine a world without heteronormativity and make it congruent, that's tough. I don't think I would be able to do it properly. To imagine a world without the patriarchy and do it, make it congruent, make it really that had some weight and made sense, and that make it relatable. Make it that you look at a world and think, okay, that I can live there, or I can see how that can succeed. Because the issue that I have is that sometimes, and I've been guilty of doing this, is that an awful lot of people, when they design worlds and they try to get away with the patriarchy, for instance, they invent things that collapse upon themselves, as if a world without men wasn't possible, or a world without women wasn't possible, or a world without, with matriarchy was impossible. More often than not, we see that, and we see it as a failing society, as a failing world, that it's going down
Mhm.
because writers cannot really imagine a way to do that and portray it in a way that it will be attractive to us. Because
Mhm.
that it's kind of dangerous. I mean, can you
Mhm.
imagine if there were a series, a saga with the weight, the gravitas, the influence of Star Wars that challenged the patriarchy in a way that would make us think twice about actually wanting to have the patriarchy?
Mhm.
That could be really, quite something.
Yeah, that's true. But that's a good point you bring up because when they about like how when people really do try to push the envelope and challenge our like default assumptions, it does so through the lens of a failing society rather than a successful one. Um, I was like, well, that's actually interesting to note because it's like, well, is there an example of say a matriarch or something? And that made me think about the drow. Um, oh, that's got some
Uh,
bags.
exactly. It's a big, the drow. Wow, how many issues do we get with the drow? Let's forget about the all the racial shit regarding the drow. Even as a matriarchy, you start to look at the way that they behave, the way that they conduct themselves, and you think this is unsustainable.
Hmm.
No society, even if the drow were whiter than white, it wouldn't matter. No society could survive with that level of uncooperation among them.
Hmm.
No one is an island. That's a fact. We
Right.
cannot live as islands. So that's the problem with it. And suddenly it's, hey, it's an evil thing. It's not
Hmm.
a good matriarchal thing. Is evil. It's a
Hmm.
bit, damn,
Yeah.
damn. That kind of sucks.
Yeah. I think it'd be one thing if Elvish culture in general skewed matriarchal. Um, oh, that might make people's heads explode though. So maybe safe or not, but
Well, but
challenge that. Go too much.
actually, in a very kind of veneered way, Tolkien made it matriarchal.
Yeah.
Tolkien made elves. Galadriel was the most powerful being on Middle Earth,
Hmm.
and I reckon that probably she could have got rid of Sauron single-handedly if she had wanted to do so. But we had to have the novel, so she couldn't do it. Bless her.
We need to send this to Kate Blanchett.
Yeah. Oh yes, she's a goddess. Oh my god, I absolutely
We need
adore
to
her.
send this podcast to Kate Blanchett. It's like, yeah, Galadriel could have done it all herself, but there would be no novel if she did.
Yeah, exactly. So, that's, but it's true. You see that, and this is what I mean with congruence. Why are you giving me an army of ants and essentially a living goddess with an almighty ring? Why are you giving me this that could just get over everything in Mordor and turn it into the new Amazon, and make it a wonderful land in an afternoon of fighting? why give me that? But then give me a whole novel, well, no, a trilogy of novels about failing relationships and how men, are basically good for very little, especially when they get a little bit of pressure. Why are you doing this?
I mean, I thought it was about Frodo and Sam's very gay love story, but apparently not.
Oh, oh, no, I'm sure Tolkien didn't have that in mind. No, I'm sure Tolkien never saw, a pair of gay men in the war, having an affair and thought, oh my God, they're so cute. They're like little hobbits. Oh, I'm going to write all this about them, but oh, how do I hide this so people don't think that I am? And now we're going to get so much hate. Oh my God, we
Oh
are
my
going to
God.
get drilled.
This is probably going to get like more like hateful comments than the racism episodes that we did.
Yeah, yeah. No. Hey,
It's like because Sam and Frodo are gay. Uh oh.
hey.
There's something kind of gay about all that. Uh oh.
No, no, no. I'm sure that I'm not. No, okay, no, Sam. No, no, they weren't gay. Frodo and Sam. No, 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 not at all. No, no.
They're not gay. They're
Yes,
hobbits.
yes, they were. They were bloody gay. Come on. At the very least, Sam was bisexual. For goodness sake, come on, get real, people.
Samwise Gamgee Bicon. Come on.
Come on, he was at the very least well bisexual. I know he gets married afterwards, and he has this love interest with that absolutely adorable looking little hobbit woman. I know, I understand all that, but you know, take it from a gay man. You don't go on a mission that could kill you 100 times with a friend from the village unless you love him so much that you would do anything for him, including taking your pants down. Come on. You just you just don't do that for anybody. I'm sorry. Sam was gay and Frodo was kind of asexual because otherwise they would have gone at it as soon as he came out of Ella's cocoon. Get real.
Oh man. I know there's a fanfic about this somewhere.
Oh,
I
I
mean,
bet there are.
there's a ton of fanfic. Oh, there's a ton of
Yeah.
Frodo Sam shipping fanfic. I know that, but just like just rewriting it with like just but making it overtly gay.
Yes. I can almost imagine some. Oh, Ella, no, bring me in the same cocoon with Frodo. Get us together. We want to be paralyzed, and stiff together. And Ella will just probably say, "What? What? When did Tolkien write? What?" And just go away. Ella find Ungoliant and say, "Mom, help me."
Tolkien was Catholic. That's the other one they'll say.
Yeah. Yes, he was.
I'm not whole. But yeah, it's just kind of interesting how like and I don't know this. I know we were supposed to be talking about world building, but this is actually part of that conversation, dear listener,
Well,
because it's it's like because like gay people aren't really a thought when people are building these worlds. So it's like um especially when it comes to representation and whatnot, and that's one of the things we're always hammering on about. It's like what would happen if say like I was talking about the mascara, but like what happens if you take heteronormativity out of the equation? Um, or like where like someone be just completely heterosexual is like rare. Or like
Well, I reckon the issue with that is that most people think, as soon as you say, what happens if you take heteronormativity out of it, immediately people create this ginormous themisterian orgy. Because unless you're straight, you are just shagging with each other all the time because you have absolutely no constraints or boundaries about how you can fuck. That's I kid you not. I bet you anything that the first thing that came to mind into a lot of people listening to this podcast to this point, when you said getting rid of heteronormativity in Themyscira was all the Amazons having a great time in that massive circus instead of having a triathlon competition.
Well, we do know that the movie was rated PG-13. We do not know if there's an unrated cut somewhere
Oh, that would be fun, I tell you.
with
That would be
scenes from
great.
Caligula edited into there.
Yeah,
To-
that would be quite funny. But
scenes from Caligula edited into there.
yeah,
And
but I reckon that would be seriously. I reckon that would be an issue. I reckon people wouldn't know what to do without heteronormativity, other than make people fuck with each other. Because quite frankly, that is more often than not the only way that people have to reflect that characters are gay or lesbian or
Mhm,
bisexual. Unless they show them fucking,
mhm.
they have no other way of, you know, conveying their homosexuality.
I mean, you could try like, "Hi, my name is Martha. This is my girlfriend Lisa." I mean,
Yeah, but it feels like that is not often enough. When I read my friend Sarah Newton's The Worm Within,
mhm,
she very cleverly puts a couple of gay characters there doing exactly that. But
mhm.
she simply mentions, the love of my life was so and so. And you think, oh, okay, so you were gay. Great. Awesome.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all you needed to do. But when I read a book, I cannot remember for the life of me. Um, it was quite hard to read because it really read like fanfic in places.
Ouch.
Um, it was a very good story, really really good story, but it just was written, averagely. It was about this. Oh, I'm throwing my son away because he's gay, because look how he's fucking with every other man he fancies and he finds attractive. I was a bit, seriously, that's all you got for me? That's
Mm,
the extent of the gay identity of this character who's meant to be the star of this book? Come
mm,
on, dude, talk to some gay people. Go to a drag queen club for an evening and have a chat.
mm,
Jesus, get some information.
mm. But I'm kind of wondering what, like, in a queer normative society, where it's like, instead of us being the anomaly, so to speak, the anomaly is the, oh, completely heterosexual. Would heterosexuality even exist, really?
Would it have any sense? Would it make any sense at all in a world
Yeah,
like
like,
that?
would it even make any sense? It's like, well, because in a heteronormative world, it's especially our Western puritanical Christian dominated thing where sex is evil and therefore we only do it to make babies and try not to enjoy it too much.
Mhm.
Um, like that wouldn't exist because then sex becomes about pleasure and intimacy, and the reproductive aspect becomes secondary.
Mhm.
So how would that change society?
You know, that's the thing. I think it would change so many things because, firstly, it would change the notion of marriage.
Mm,
It would change. Actually, I'm going to rephrase that. It maybe wouldn't change the notion of marriage because I think the desire to join forces with somebody else, whether it is same gender or not, for
mhm,
the rest of your life, it can still be very attractive
mm,
for some people. I know it is for me, for my husband. So it makes sense. But it would change the um, aspect of monogamy,
mhm,
because what would be the point? If sex is not a bad thing,
mhm,
if desire is not something to be shunned, if sexual exploration is not something to be, uh, you know, shameful about, like we are now,
mhm,
then what will stop us from having a freer, generally happier, and a lot healthier society?
mhm,
But then, how do you portray that?
mhm,
How do you portray that? Because the thing is, if you did and people started to read that, they would just say, "This is ridiculous. This is impossible. I don't like it. Don't give me this. I cannot believe it. My suspension of disbelief is gone."
mhm. Yeah, because I was like, okay, so because I mean, it, and I know I'm kind of hammering on this, but it really boggles my mind. It's like, okay, so marriage wouldn't be about, uh, children's inheritance necessarily. I mean, or then again, it's just like, well,
Actually,
or it had to be reformed, or it wouldn't be about biological ties. Like even notions about marriage and family would change.
imagine that if you did that, marriage could actually become just a tool. Marriage would be only for convenience, because you don't, if you don't need to have an intimate link with the person you marry, if you do it just out of sharing land or fortune or name, then maybe marriage would become something to be traded. I'll sell you my marriage. I don't know. That's the thing, and this is, going back to the world building. That is the thing I reckon we should be seeing a lot more often.
Hmm.
The what ifs of fantasy, of world building, and that I don't think people are spending off long enough exploring.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, because like the ramifications of that, it's just like they're fascinating because it's not like, okay, it would literally change everything. It's like, would marriage even technically exist in such a world where, okay, well, yeah, you might have commitment ceremonies or whatever, but that's a different thing. Uh, if we're talking about marriage as it meant historically, not contemporary, where we think it's about love. I mean, it's like, and I don't mean not you and your husband. I mean like the the, the aspect of marriage where, especially here in the states, I don't know if it's true in Spain or not, where there are a lot of material benefits to being married.
Oh yes.
Okay, um, and whether or not the people truly love each other, regardless of gender, doesn't necessarily enter the equation.
No, actually, more of very, very often peer pressure comes into it.
Yeah.
The family ties and family. Oh, when are you gonna give me grandchildren? Oh, when are you going to settle down and find a good woman? A bit that.
But yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. It's like if you remove that compulsion, right? If you remove that, the uh the sense that a marriage is about making babies or raising babies or something. But even then it's like, well, you can adopt. There's nothing saying you can't adopt. And then
true.
and then it's like, okay, wait a minute. So that goes far reaching. So even the way we conceptualize families would be different. The way we look at relationships and commitment would be different. But then it'd be like, well, so okay, so how do you keep your wealth or your, oh, such as it is, within the family unit? And then it's like, well, maybe it would be something. Well, maybe it would be something where we have like very binding contracts or something where it's not uh, given the veneer of, say, holy communion necessarily. That's a completely separate thing from land and property rights. You
Mhm.
know, so that would be interesting to like really explore the ramifications of.
Absolutely, and this is the thing that I can imagine it would be very, very hard for some people to do. So, as I said, and I don't mean to be offensive with this, I don't think that an awful lot of people have the ability, the talent to truly develop that kind of world in a way that would be attractive and congruent.
Mm,
It's a very hard thing to do. So
mm,
I would love to see that. I don't expect to see that to that level. And by the way, I'm not saying that I will be able to do it, just in case we have some clever dick thinking, well, why don't you do it, Paco? Because I don't think I would be able to do it. Sorry guys, but you sound like that when you talk to me and make comments that like that.
mm,
But what I would like to see, and I know that everybody can do this, and this is an argument that I've had so many times with so many people, is just play around with a wider spectrum that you already have. So many people complaining recently about the combat wheelchair. how many of those people have actually explored, disabilities within their own worlds and
Mhm.
how that would affect things?
Right. I asked a question like that, not about world building per se, but it was just a question I had where it's like, well, what if, because I noticed that in a lot of fantasy worlds, magic functions as a kind of technology.
Hmm.
I have my bone to pick with that, but I'm like, well, if in worlds where magic functions as a kind of technology, wouldn't disabled people be more than likely the ones to discover those things out of sheer necessity? Like, um, for instance, and I'm sorry to say it like to cut you off or whatever, but it is something I actually asked.
Mhm.
Where um, instead of, let me see if I can pull it up. It's on my Tumblr, and no, I'm not sharing the link to my Tumblr
Okay.
because I don't want people to stumble on my weirdness and spread it all around the internet more than usual. Um, it's like I asked the question like, what if like magic was a direct result of disabled people trying to find a way to make a space for themselves in the world? Because like something like, for instance, telepathy.
Mhm.
Well, of course, that would make sense to somebody who might be on the very extreme end of the autism spectrum, or someone who is incapable of, you know, normal speech.
Mhm.
Um, there's the, where was it? There's the like the where like a person who's like telekinesis
Mhm.
could come from a person who is, who like had a spinal injury and can't um and is unable to, move their limbs. So they develop this other way in order to care for themselves, or to feed themselves and do this thing, this, that, and the third. And I'm like, well, that would make sense, because it's like, as they say, necessity is the mother of invention. So why would, an able-bodied person who, has who doesn't need these things stumble on them first? Doesn't make sense to me. I think like disabled people and neurodivergent people will probably uh, have a need for such things and be motivated to fulfill those needs more so than like a neurotypical able-bodied person. And then I said, no, and then I think I went further and said, what if like all those magical academies or whatever in the middle of nowhere weren't really, these towers to elitism, but just safe places for neural divergent and disabled people to, to be in a place that's safe for them, um, where they don't have to deal with like the BS that comes with living in a world that devalues them, or pretends that they don't exist. Um, but yeah, so it's just like, again, like switching your that, flipping the switch on what you think is normal, um, or what you think is like as a default. I think it's yeah. I don't know. It's like, I don't know. Do you think that players would be more inclined to explore that angle as opposed to like the queer normative or uh, matriarchal element, or is that along the same lines where it's like, well, it's different,
I
therefore, I don't want it.
Well, I reckon because of the scale
Mhm,
of then the sheer number of people, the scale of which it affects society, it would
mhm,
probably be easier to explore a world with less ableism, where people with disabilities are not uh, hindered, but they
mhm,
are actually empowered.
mhm.
by their disability, as you said, by developing their inventiveness, by developing areas of communication, areas of relationships, or areas of technology that otherwise would be, completely unnecessary for us. Um, I reckon that would be easier because it would affect a very specific number of people rather than everything else. So I can imagine a world in which, for example, somebody who has lost a limb
Mhm.
can get a replacement limb, and or simply they learn to live, or they can live without that limb because the world is adapted
Mhm.
for them, because people don't see that as a sign of you are less of a person because you have less limbs than I do,
Mhm.
because that's essentially what happens in our world.
Mhm.
We see people in a wheelchair, and you're lesser because you cannot run as fast as me or whatever. Yeah, that's the kind of thinking that an awful lot of people will have in their minds, even if it is subconsciously. So I reckon it would be easier to describe a world in which, yeah, neurodiversity is not a problem but an asset,
Mhm.
and how that affects everything else around. I think that could be done quite quite nicely,
Mhm.
um, actually, and I think that would be very, very, very well worth exploring.
Mhm. Yeah.
But yeah, I think it would be easier to do that,
Mhm.
much more relatable than uh, getting rid of heteronormativity. I think the number of heads spinning and the thought of losing heteronormativity would be way, way greater than the number of heads spinning at the notion of having a neurodiverse person who is just accepted as and capable of doing things.
What do you think that is? Do you think it's because most of us at some point will either be or know someone neurodivergent or disabled, or is it because it's less of a stretch to?
No, I think it's less of a stretch, because everybody, you only have to go out there and say, "Oh, I'm LGBT," and immediately people will come up with, "Oh, I have a gay friend, so I cannot be homophobic," kind of thing. So everybody knows a gay person. Everybody knows somebody who's autistic. Everybody knows somebody with some sort of impairment, physical, or mental health issues. So I think it's a matter of stretch. It's a matter of how much of a change would something exert in a credible, congruous world. And I reckon that changing heteronormativity would be too much of a stretch for most people, because
Mm,
reproduction mostly.
right. Mm, yeah. But it will be interesting if anybody listening to this is creating a world right now, especially with the disability and neurodivergence thing, like with how magic functions in most role playing settings as a kind of technology. And of course, assistive technology. I don't know why people don't make that leap. um, but yeah, so I think I agree with you. It's probably more of a stretch to imagine no heteronormativity, no patriarchy. Um,
And that's I'm going to reach a little bit here. Okay, so again, listeners, viewers, do take this with a pinch of salt. But I reckon that getting rid of heteronormativity would be more of a threat for a lot of people than having neurodiverse scientists
mm,
as being revered and being the keystones of technological development, for instance. I don't know, I think people would see that as a threat, because some people may not like to admit that they actually like what they see,
mm,
and that's a very, very real possibility.
mm. Yeah, unfortunately, yeah.
No, it's the case. How many people do we know that would say, "Oh, no, no, that's just impossible," because sorry, but isn't that because you're actually a little bit gay or a little bit lesbian and you don't want to admit it to yourself? And then this is kind of threatening you. Come on, be honest with yourself. That happens a lot.
Mm. Yeah. It's like, and of course, dear listener, we're not saying that if you're homophobe, you're secretly gay. That is not the point we're trying to make.
No, no. Well, it might be,
It's
but no.
no, it's just that internalized homophobia is a thing.
It is. I mean, uh, even institutionalized homophobia. Like the idea that trans people cannot serve in the army. Is that kind of thing that you may not be transphobe anywhere else, but suddenly they want to bring a trans person into your professional environment, and suddenly the whole thing collapses for you. That's the thing. It may not. It could be just in specific areas where that homophobia or that transphobia is visible, and for people to admit, okay, let's bring this trans person here, if they come and they prove that they are as capable as I am, then what does it say about what
Mm-hmm.
I've been told since ever?
Yeah.
It crumbles the foundations of the castle that I have, where I have built my life.
Mm-hmm.
And that I can understand being very, very scary for a lot of people. And I can understand, not that I agree, I don't, and I'm not justifying it, but I can understand why some people will have a backlash against that, because
Mm-hmm.
he's basically getting rid of their foundations.
Mm. Yeah, that can make sense. That makes sense. I guess the foundation is that shaky. I mean,
But that's the thing, that we have a very, very low foundations, and going back into world building, the fact that we still see so many Tolkien-esque worlds of fantasy being built over and over and over and over, and they try to say that something new is proof that we have cardboard foundations. No,
mhm,
come on, is that all you got? As soon as you move a little bit, you add a little bit of water to that foundation, it crumbles. It's made of sugar.
mhm, mhm. Yeah.
So we see that way too often. A number of times that I get press releases from my website with, this is a brand new world. Elves have been in a constant battle with dwarves for centuries. And you get, how the fuck is that a new world? I mean, what are you going to call it? Remembered realms? What the hell are you talking about?
Ugh, God. And I like elves. I like dwarves. I like vampires. But come on, people. Or rather, you know what? Speaking of elves and dwarves and stuff like that, if you're gonna do like classic fantasy stuff, me personally, I would like to see a little more variety. Like, and then this is just a jumping off point. It's a complete tangent, and I admit it. The You know what? I feel like the natural enemies of elves would not be dwarves or goblins, but vampires. Um, if, like an elf versus vampire thing that's been going on for centuries, I can believe that because
Okay.
they're both antithetical to one another. It's like elves are truly alive, vampires are undead. Let's just, and never the twain shall meet. Okay, that just, I'm just throwing that out there for future world builders.
That
Elves
would be
versus
amazing.
vampires, give it to me.
Can I imagine that, a world in which humans are kind of like the Big Macs of vampires. We're the fast food, and elves are like the Michelin star of restaurants, and vampires even fight with each other to get elves to actually draw blood from them, but they actually
True
look
blood?
after
You
them.
mean
They
true
don't want to run out of elves.
blood? You mean true blood? Where that's actually the case.
Well, yes, okay. I missed that show.
Oh man, oh that show.
But
That show was something.
yeah, that I miss that show so much.
It
But
was
yeah, that's the kind of thing that I like that you brought that up, because that's the kind of thing that just by the sheer notion of it, as soon as you begin to play with it,
Mhm,
so many fun things can come out of it, and so many dramatic things can come out of it.
mhm.
It's
Oh yeah,
wonderful. It's wonderful.
yeah, and actually, True Blood did something really interesting. It's like I can't speak for the Stackhouse novels. I read them. I tried to read them. The writing is mm, mm, that's the writing. I was like the writing is there. The writing is it's written in English.
Okay.
It's written in English.
Wow. Oof,
Um,
that sets the tone.
but but the idea of like, okay, what would happen if people knew about vampire? Like, blow open that masquerade. It's like, oh, is this
Yes.
how you get like blow it up? Why would a vampire care? It's just like, yeah, they're vampires. Now what? How do they pay their taxes? I mean, like, do they still, they still need like, could you imagine vampires being real? How would that change basic things? Like, so many of our laws are set up from the baseline assumption that people who break the laws are eventually going to die. So how does the death penalty figure into this, or life imprisonment, or things like that? If vampires are real, um,
And I'm going to again say something that may upset some people, but and
you're
this
on a
is
roll
going
today, Paco.
well, I'm practicing for 2021. That's going to be my year. But it makes me wonder because this is not an incredibly outlandish concept. The fact that the masquerade is gone.
Mhm.
Why haven't White Wolf created that world?
I mean, part of me thinks it might be a license they can get you, where like they don't want to get sued.
No, 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 not at all. I mean, vampire, they're not masquerade, whatever. That could have been well within their realms.
Mm, yeah,
They could have done that as a spin-off
mhm,
line of work.
yeah. I
You
mean,
know,
I'd have to look at the publication dates for the Sticky Stackhouse novels and such. But like, uh, intellectual property conflicts aside, yeah, it
yes.
makes it makes
Apart, apart from that, okay, intellectual property conflicts. Look, if Underworld got away with it,
mm,
sorry, White Wolf can't get away with it
okay.
because Underworld was the biggest, more ginormous ripoff of an RPG franchise I have ever seen.
Mm,
I mean, that was incredible. Watching those films and thinking, holy shit, could you be more obvious?
mm.
I mean, come, my God, Jesus, you're evil. You're absolutely evil on doing this to White Wolf. But
The
hey, there you
werewolves
go.
look like ass though. um,
Well, yeah, I know that they're being asses at times, but even so, I mean,
werewolves look like ass. They weren't cool or sexy. They were just ugly.
yeah.
So,
But anyway, yes, that's something that that's a sort of thing that to go back into the beginning of the episode. This is the sort of thing that we are missing. Why aren't you doing that sort of mashovers and what ifs
mhm. Yeah,
anymore? You know,
yeah, and it's like, and I think the bigger point and the thing that we're kind of circling around but haven't directly addressed yet is using fantasy and science fiction as ways to deeply engage with and deeply engage with questions about our society.
mhm,
Because that's what the best science fiction does that.
absolutely.
Where it's like, um, where you know, yeah, I mean, yes, there's a good story well told, but also, what is this trying to say about the world we live in? Um, and that's another thing. That's kind of what I liked about True Blood too. It's like, well, what does it say about the world we live in? Like, yeah, we have all this other stuff, but what is it trying to bring light to and make us ask questions about? And I think, you know, and I get it. Yeah, RPGs are entertainment, but it's like there's so much potential to elevate the hobby to something more. You know what I mean? Where where it's like we can, by asking not just what if, but like, what does it mean when we change this thing? What does that say about where we live now? Or what does it, and how would things be better or worse or what have you? Um, but by like bringing this massive change and putting it front and center. Um, yeah. So I guess something. I mean, we've been going at this for over an hour, so
Yes, and we should wrap it up because
yeah.
people are going to have an awful lot to think about, uh, and I would like just to make sure that we reiterate some of the things that we have said, and that people leave with something to really think about. Yeah, Sam and Frodo were gay.
Mhm. Mhm.
Get over it, people. Um, Sorry. Anyway, I think we can stop it now. And leave out your comments, humans, please.
Yeah.
Seriously, it is good, even if you don't agree with us. Just don't be an asshole. That's all we
Mhm.
ask. If you disagree with us, that's cool. It's
Mhm.
not an issue. This is not something that we are going to argue or fight over. This is something that we can actually agree to disagree if need be.
Yeah, it's that whole artist subjective thing.
Correct.
Yeah.
And
And,
it's cool if you like something we
yeah.
don't. Just tell me
Please.
why you like it.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
please share questions, things you want to see us talk about. Um, I'd love to see some examples of the things that we were talking about where it's like, well, that game actually exists. Tell me about that game.
exactly. Exactly. So please do so by getting in touch with us in Twitter. You know where we are. I am at GMS Magazine, and I'm going to be tagging Shawn as soon as this episode is out. So you can tag her too. And you can write us at podcast@gmsmagazine.com. You can find me in Facebook, where I spent way too much time. I know. I know. I'm gonna spend way less time in 2021. I'm going to be a very very good boy in this coming year. Bullshit. And we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much for listening. Bye. The dinosaurs